Hello and welcome to Season 10, Episode 2 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading the Thomas Sowell Reader, a collection of essays, very short essays from the economist Thomas Sowell, economist and essayist and political commentator. Still in the section on social issues here, reading about the next 10 essays, 20 pages or so. Interesting stuff in this one, some more about how we should treat humans and the family, and about revisionist history, all sorts of those sort of social issues in this chapter. And one essay that was just a whole bunch of puns that I think was just an April Fool's prank that he put out in his column, I guess to show us that not everything he wrote about was just everything is awful right now.
If I remember correctly, his syndicated column, he did that every year.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, that makes sense.
I could be wrong, but I sound like I have an echo in my head.
I don't hear anything.
You don't hear the echo? Fine. All right, it is in my head. I'm a little discombobulated today. I got had a fun time representing a municipality last night.
Mm.
So it's
I know we were planning on recording last night because we didn't record last week because I was out of the country. But yeah, I know you called me at 9:40 p.m. my time, which is 8:40 p.m. your time, driving home from what sounded like a very, very long and fun meeting that you had.
Mm-hmm. What should I say? Other than in my youth, I would not have been able to refrain from saying the things that I was thinking.
That's always a good sign.
I'm no longer youthful, but that serves me better.
All right. I guess that's an optimistic opinion
professionally.
There.
Yes, professionally. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to say too much because it'd be just my luck that this idiot mayor. No, I'm sorry. Just joking. He's not an idiot. This person who is unhappy with me last night will listen to the podcast and be like, oh no, now I really want to fire him.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. And so it's like, the funny thing is, as a lawyer and as really a businessman or a woman, once you get to a certain point or a certain point of success, you're like, if somebody says, I'm going to fire you, you're like, go do it. Like, yes, please. Take my wife, please. Anyway, so I'm still a little aggravated, and I ran. I'm trying to get not back into shape. I'm trying to get into shape. It's been a 54-year effort, and so I went to the gym after work, which is quite an accomplishment, just to go there with the intent of working out, and then I did 2/3 of what I wanted to do. So in a sense, that's not a failing grade, but it's a D, isn't it? There's a failing grade if you're in private school, but in parochial school, but if you're in public school, it's a D.
Not quite the 60%, so you pass.
I got 66%. I get 2/3.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because I guess 60 and below is F, right, in public school system.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's right. And then 61 to 70 is D, 71
what
to
was
80.
It at Pius? So it was like 93 to 100 for an A.
92 and a half. It was like 7.5% for each. Yeah.
85 to 92 is a B. 75 to 85 is a
Something
C.
like that, yeah.
And D was mine was like 70 to 74 in my school, maybe. And then they get shorter at each end.
Interesting.
Correctly, so I don't know. Somewhere in there's an F.
Well, I know University of Florida, where I'm at now, they have a plus system. So you have an A plus and an A B plus and a B, and I'm not sure where all the cutoffs go, and I'm not sure how that affects your GPA if it's all just the same, and I don't know what it means, but there's actually a plus system, and I don't really know why.
Yeah. Well, in SAU Carbondale School of Law, I don't know if they still do this, but they had a forced median for each class. Each class had a median of a 2.6 individual class. So it was median. So, You had a big cluster right around 2.6, and then you have some outliers, either high or low or something.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yes. And so then you're applying for jobs, and and that's when grade inflation was really kind of beginning
Mm-hmm.
back in the 90s. And so you're competing against these other law schools, and they have all A's and B's. And you're like, why is your cumulative GPA at 2.9? That's excellent. It's above the median. You have to explain the median, and they're like, what is this retard talking about? they they think you're lying,
Yeah.
because the
Uh-huh.
lawyers are suspicious. But that was fun.
Yes.
Thankfully, I'm at the point of my career that nobody cares what my GPA was.
That's
Uh,
good. Yeah.
yes.
Well, I'm sure the this discussion of grading skills is really interesting to all of our many listeners. But we should probably start talking about the chapters in this
I
book.
feel like our listener
Hmm.
appreciates our anecdotes. Now, you don't share any anecdotes. You just sit over there with your wry smile
I
and
could share some anecdotes. Well,
yeah, share an anecdote.
you
Share
never
an
invite
anecdote.
an anecdote.
What do
You
you mean?
just give.
Nobody invited my anecdotes. If
Well,
anything,
that's what I mean.
if
You
anything,
take
I'm
up.
just asserting them, and you try to interrupt me.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
take up all the available anecdote space, so I can't offer my own. All the space is given up to you, and somebody has to bring it back to the book.
I haven't offered an anecdote in several episodes.
Mm,
I
mm.
was overdue.
Yeah. Well, my
So what's your
anecdote
anecdote?
is,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
No,
I alluded to it at the beginning of the episode. I was just in France. I said I was out of the
that's
country.
not
That's
an
what,
anecdote.
that's an anecdote. Why is that not an anecdote? It's
That's just information.
okay.
Give
Well,
me an anecdote.
what's an anecdote?
Anecdote is like a small, brief story of some interesting thing that happened. Give me an anecdote, not just where you were. Give me an anecdote.
Yeah, well, we traveled around the south of France as I was visiting my girlfriend. We went out to Avignon. It was really pretty. We saw the palace where the popes lived in the 1300s when they
Hmm.
were kind of held captive a little bit by the French government, but also just kind of corrupt and wanted to move to a new Rome and establish this giant castle place out there. That was really
Nice.
cool, and they waged war against people in this castle and stuff like that. Went out to Monaco for about a full day. Yeah, no, it was a good trip. It was my
Any
first time
bad
ever out of the country.
any bad things? I'm usually complaining about stuff.
Mhm.
Oh, you have good stuff. Complaining anecdotes are the best.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have as many bad things happen to me as happen to you.
Hmm. You're such a cheerful person. You probably don't even notice.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that actually kind of happened over the trip, where it was we were in Monaco, and they have like this little Christmas, marketplace, and of course Monaco is a very fancy, rich place. So we felt a little bit out of place to a certain degree because neither me nor my girlfriend are rich or fancy. But we were sitting outside on this little bench, and apparently we were sitting at the wrong bench. With each little stand has their own seating section. And so we were sitting there,
Oh,
having this drink that we got from this other stand, and this woman came up speaking French, of course. I don't speak any French, but she came up and talked to us. And evidently what she said, translated to me by my girlfriend who does speak French, was excuse me, we have some clients over here who would like to sit down, and since you guys kind of just walked up and sat here, we're going to have to ask you to move. And so we left, of course, but this person was apparently very rude, and I didn't even notice. And I was just like, "Oh, okay, they want us to move. Let's move along." But my girlfriend was not happy about it. Molly was she just felt very angry about that, and I was like, "Ah, yeah, whatever."
I like her more and more every day. And I wish she would have pulled like an angry American bad
Mm,
tourist.
yeah.
Do you know who I am? I'm an
Hmm.
American.
Hmm.
We saved your ass in 1943.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know if we saved Monaco. I don't know what Monaco was doing in the 1940s.
Well, we either saved them or we conquered them, one or the
Yeah,
other.
that's true. Well, Monaco's still around, and I don't know. They're not too relevant on the world stage. I hope the Prince of Monaco isn't listening to this because he probably wouldn't be too happy about that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm. That was a good what do you call it?
anecdote.
Anecdote. Thank you.
I'll
Lost the
try to
word.
offer some more, I guess.
No, that was good. That was good. I like that.
All
That was a
right.
good slice of life.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Excellent. Speaking of the interesting things that happened to you, his first article that
Mm.
the next chapter is human livestock. which this French woman was kind of treating you like. Get your own
Yes.
corral.
Yeah, exactly.
And that probably is what your girlfriend was upset about,
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's what she was saying. She's like, I just think that's so rude to just assert that we don't belong here when it's just this public bench that we're sitting at.
Oh,
We
it's
just
a
happen to,
public bench. It wasn't like
yeah, well,
reserved
it's
for.
Well, it's on a road. It's like
Yeah.
this little section of the road, and they have like these little Christmas stalls. Like they're not like permanent
Yes.
restaurants. They just have these little
Right.
stands set up where they're serving, hot chocolate and mulled wine or whatever. And each one, I guess, just had these little like temporary outdoor chairs that they had set
Really.
up, and we were just sitting at the wrong temporary
Uh,
outdoor chairs.
yeah.
That's what the problem was. And she said, well, we have some clients. And what especially made her mad is that the two women who were the clients, ordering a drink from this tiny little, essentially a snack stand, saw us, walked past us, and then asked the employee to have her move us, because these two rich women, I guess, did not want to talk to us, foreigners sitting on the bench outside.
You missed your opportunity to cuss out people in France. No,
Yeah.
what is it? Is Monaco? That's an independent
Monaco's independent. Yeah, they have their own
city
prince and
state.
everything. Yeah, they have it's a tiny, tiny country. You could walk the whole length of it in like 30
Yes.
minutes.
Their claim to fame is Princess Grace of Monaco.
Yes. Yeah, we saw she's buried in the cathedral.
A beautiful woman. She was
She's an
in North by
actress.
Northwest
Yes. Yeah.
with Cary Grant.
Hmm.
An excellent movie. Have you ever seen it?
I think we've watched it together.
That is correct.
All right.
All
You're going to
right.
talk about this article.
Yeah. So I mean, I everything that Thomas Sowell writes, I love. I mean, I have yet to read anything from him that I'm like, this is just, or he doesn't have a good point. I mean, everything, and he's so
Hmm.
precise in his language. It's just so fun to read, and I'm glad I insisted on us reading this book. So the first one is, basically his point is, um, that the government is turning Americans like livestock, or treating Americans like livestock with the social programs and like feeding trough type behavior. And he says this is a vision of human beings as livestock to be fed by the government and herded and tended by the anointed. And he loves
Hmm.
mentioning the anointed. That's
Hmm.
that because he called it, and I love that term too, because like people talk about like the the upper echelons of American power, and it's usually like some sort of uh, description of them as being our superiors, but
Hmm.
they really aren't. They are kind of in their own way anointed to be
Yeah.
better. They not like in a spiritual way, but like they've just been granted this higher status among their peers, and then we're supposed to just bow down before them
Yeah.
like they're lords and ladies of
Hmm.
the United States.
Yes.
And he makes the point the welfare state is not really about the welfare of the masses; it is about the ego of the
Hmm.
elites,
Yeah.
and that just brilliant stuff. So,
Hmm.
I don't want to steal all his
Yeah.
quotes, but I mean he's just a quote machine.
Hmm.
I was more interested. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but I was more
I was going to
interested.
say, yeah, on this article, I like what he says. Overcoming adversity is one of our great desires and one of our great sources of pride. Right? And he says,
Yes.
and by just giving everything to people, you're robbing us of that. Not just having a challenge that we can overcome, but just doing away with one of the things that we desire in life. And I think that is true. And I think when people don't have that, I think it's a hard thing to place. Like I don't think anyone wishes for things to be more difficult. I don't think anyone has
Mhm.
ever like explicitly asked for that. But if everything's just kind of handed to you, it's like, okay, what's the point of this? And I think you'll find that something's missing, but you don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it is that adversity, that challenge, where it's like, I know I want to work for something, but
Uh-huh.
it's a very hard desire to place for sure.
Yeah, and I think that thought is finally resonating with pop culture in ways that it hasn't in recent years. Like even somebody who's left to center, although now they're calling him right wing, Joe Rogan
Hmm.
talks about, especially when he's talking with fellow comedians, where he says he really is of the opinion, and they all kind of agree. They have a recurring broadcast, which I've never made it through any of these particular things. They're called Protect Our Parks,
Hmm.
which is him, Shane Gillis, Mark Norman, and I can picture the fourth guy, but I can't remember his name. Ari Shafir, I think. And what they do is they get together for that podcast, and it's like a 3 hour podcast, but they just drink the entire time, and it gets sillier and stupider as they
I can
go.
imagine.
But they're all very talented comedians and very sharp tongued and sharp witted people, and they obviously have an affection for each other too. But again, they talked about this last one, which is like their 14th of these
Wow.
Protect Our Parks episodes, how they had to earn, what they have, and good comedians have to go through bombing and the suffering
Mm-hmm.
and how they're better for it. And he talks often about his martial arts training and how he had to suffer through that and how it made him a better person. He mentions that, and his guests mention that all the time. But it's kind of funny because then they talk about, if they talk about their children, they talk about how their children have been not struggling, because they've achieved success.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, do they realize, I mean, you always want your children to have an easier life, but in some ways they're better off if they don't.
Yeah.
It is a really paradox. If you improve yourself through suffering, through the hard times to get to the good times, well, then the next generation, that whole saying of the good times make the
Yeah. Well, to,
hard
to bring it into politics, we just saw that happen with Joe Biden doing what he swore and promised he would never do, and he would make sure that his son, faced the consequences, and it'd be a trial that would play out, and whatever. He just pardoned Hunter, not just for any crimes that he was currently being charged for, but for any crimes he may have committed over an entire more than 10-year span since like 2014.
right.
So that's, I think, a good example of coddling, or whatever, or maybe just looking out for himself. Maybe Hunter's
Yeah.
crimes would also implicate him. With the whole Ukraine Burisma stuff, and possibly selling influence, all that nonsense that I'm sure other people have
So
heard.
yeah. So and that's kind of an interesting take on this particular subject, but because Joe Biden is a horrible person.
Yeah.
And I think that and of course I knew that he was going to pardon Hunter.
Yeah. I mean,
I
I think
said it.
it was clear. Yeah.
I have to collect on a $10 bet that I made at Rotary some months ago with a Democrat that was, he's never going to. And my argument was, of course he's going to pardon him. It's his son.
Yeah.
What father, if given that power, you're not going to pardon your son? What kind of weirdo are you?
Yeah.
Especially because I was talking about the two crimes that he was, I don't know if he had been found guilty of both of them yet, but I think he had, which was a tax evasion and a technical weapons charge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, quite frankly, in the big scheme of things, nobody cares about those crimes.
Yeah.
But of course, the perverted Department of Justice slow rolled the investigation of the true crimes, which were the bribery scandals. So the statute of limitations ran on most of that. Probably not all, because it was an ongoing conspiracy for such a long time and part of an overall effort of the entire Biden family. And so you're going to see anyway. So I bet $10. I said, look, every father's. I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I don't think less of him for pardoning his son. I would think less of him if he didn't.
Yeah.
But he's gonna have to pardon his brother.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of business associates and family members that profited off of this corruption. I don't know if you can pardon yourself. We're going to find out, because I think he's going to pardon himself. And I'm sure Joe Biden too, because why not?
Yeah.
But what's really fun about the whole thing is that in his explanation of the pardon was, my Department of Justice is corrupt and politicized. And so I have to pardon my own son, these corrupt bastards. And I'm thinking, why didn't you fire them? They are direct subordinates of you. You are the head of the Department of Justice. This is not a separate agency. You are the chief law enforcement officer, chief attorney of the Department of Justice. It's not a separate branch of government. They're your subordinates. Merrick Garland was hired by him and serves at his pleasure. And so what is beautiful, it's artistic in the way it sets up President Trump to pardon anybody he wants, and says, look, I have to agree with Joe Biden. The Department of Justice is politically corrupt and compromised. And this guy, Kash Patel, who has very strong language, about what he intends to do, including asserting he's going to fire everybody at FBI headquarters and ship off whoever's left to the various field offices to be cops because they're cops. They have forgotten that, of course. They think they're political consultants. And so it's hard to argue against gutting the Department of Justice and the FBI when the president of the United States of the opposing party agrees that it's completely corrupted and politicized. And then the icing on that beautiful, perfect cake, as Trump would surely describe it, is all the dummy media liars that have for 6 months insisted that President Biden says that no one's above the law and he is never going to pardon his son Hunter. And all of us knew, of course, he's going to pardon Biden after the election. It was never a possibility he wasn't. And they're still trying to insist that there's some, good explanation for where he's just loves his son so much.
Well, it's been very funny to see them then just blame Trump for it, as they always do. They always find a way. It's like, well, Trump did it first with what Kushner,
Kushner's father-in-law, who had already served time.
Yes, exactly. But they're like, well, he did it for him, and he was just setting the standard. And who can blame Biden after Trump, ruined the whole system, and now Biden's forced to play in this? And it's like, okay, sure, whatever.
Well, you go back to the supporters of Hillary Clinton, the Puerto Rican terrorist groups that were in charge of bombing. How about their friend Mark Rich, who is a white collar criminal that they pardoned? He had a slew of friends and associates that he pardoned on his last day leaving office. And it was thought it was going to poison the well so much that she would never be able to recover politically, but then she became senator of New York and then the nominee. For president. But that has gone on for every president, pardons me. The Clinton ones were really weird. They were really bad. I'm trying to remember Obama. I can't even remember those, but there were terrorists. The Fallen, I think, is FALN. No, wait, was it them or was it a different group? There was a terrorist group that, and I think one of them might even have bombed Congress. We'll have to look that up after the podcast. That Clinton pardoned, and which is ironic considering the January 6th, the worst attack in the history of the United States against our democracy, which resulted in no federal employee deaths, but at least 2 protesters killed by the law enforcement officers. They never talk about the second lady who was beat to death by an officer, but we do know because it's on video that Ashley Babbitt got shot in the head when she was unarmed by this weirdo that just murdered her with no warning. Anyway, I went off on a rant.
Yes, that was a rant.
That was not an anecdote. That was a rant.
That was. But
you invited it.
I did. I apologize. It was the Fallen terrorist group, FALN. Yeah, you were right. Yes.
Are they the ones that bombed Congress?
They bombed New York City and Chicago. I'm not seeing Congress. I know there were communists who bombed Congress.
Maybe I'm just kidding.
Congress, and that's what people forget. Congress has been bombed multiple times. There have been multiple bombings within the U.S. Congress. Right. But no, January 6th was the worst day in American history. Yeah. Yeah,
and I'm thinking, have you heard of the War of 1812? I mean, American history. What are you, nuts?
All right. Well, we should move on to the next article.
They don't know. They don't know anything that happened prior to their adult lifetime.
Yeah,
it's amazing. They're complaining about the qualifications of different nominees for that Trump is nominating for various offices, and some are better than others, of course. But they're saying, well, this is not qualified. I'm like, what are you talking about? Pete Buttigieg was a mayor of a small town. And he likes trains. That's his qualifications for director of transportation. What are you even talking about? But we all know what his real qualification is. He married a dude. That's his qualification. He married a dude. They adopted some poor child.
Yeah, yikes.
100% qualified to be in the cabinet because you marry a dude. But only if you're another dude.
Mm-hmm.
You're a woman, the Dems don't like it. Anyway, So it's
Yes, the next article he writes about to
the
pivot away
Einstein
from that.
syndrome
Yes.
is really interesting. And I forgot about his research into delayed speech because he was a
Hmm.
social scientist. And I don't know if you want to take over, but I think this is fascinating because there is documentation of huge increases in people being diagnosed with autism. And this
Hmm.
article would have been written probably in the early aughts.
Yeah.
And he really keys into this idea that if you have delayed speech or any sort of developmental delays, you're autistic or you're retarded. They
Hmm.
don't say retarded
Yeah.
anymore, um, but his research and the research of the author of the study he cites in this article is that if you have delayed speech, it usually means that other parts of your brain not affiliated with speech are growing or are more prominent, and so that's why your speech is delayed because you're so much smarter with everything else, like
Yeah.
Einstein.
Hmm.
That's why a lot of people they're like, "Oh, I'm autistic." Well, it's only because you're an idiot. You're an odd duck. You're socially awkward. Yeah, I'm autistic too.
Yeah.
I'm autistic. I'm socially awkward. I'm shy. You know, you know what they used to do with people my age,
Hmm.
in my generation, when you're autistic,
Sure.
quit acting stupid, act normal. That's what they'd say to you. And if you didn't act normal, you know what would happen to you at school, Adam? Do you know what?
What would happen?
You know,
You
you
get
get your
bullied?
ass kicked. Some kid would punch you. Quit acting stupid.
All right.
And you know what would happen?
Yeah.
You know what would happen?
You would
You'd
stop
stop
acting
acting
stupid.
stupid.
All right.
Now,
There's
granted, there are people with legitimate disability,
yes.
and you shouldn't punch them. I'm not advocating that.
Yes. No, of
But if you're
course.
if you're acting up and you're feigning some sort of inability to control yourself or to focus or whatever when you can if you just use some effort, that is not a mental
Mhm.
defect or disease that we have to placate. That's
Yeah.
something you just overcome.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but I did like this one because it is,
Yeah.
somewhat related to my field. I'm not a cognitive linguist by any
Mm.
means. That's actually one of the least interesting points of the field, in my opinion. But no, it was interesting because he says, no one really knows for sure why this is so. Why these geniuses. I mean, he lists, Albert Einstein and Benito Mussolini and
Mm.
a whole bunch of other people, Edward Teller, a whole bunch of people, and that they all just had very delayed speaking. They didn't learn to speak until much later than you would expect. I know he says like one of the theories is that research on Einstein's brain, where he saw that different parts of the brain had grown, were more
Mm.
developed, and sort of had moved into the space of sort of the speaking areas, where language is housed and things like that. And it's an interesting question of like how that happens and why it does. But yeah, no, and I like how he references Steven Pinker, who we've talked about on the podcast before, because he was that linguist who, some years after this was almost blacklisted from the Linguistic Society of
Yeah.
America from having, even a slightly centrist position on a political issue. So it's always interesting to see his name come up because I always like that anecdote about him.
Yes.
Anything else on the Einstein syndrome?
No, I think I've ranted out on that one.
Yes, you kind of went off on your own thing there.
Yeah, well, whatever. So the next article that he has in his compilation is the right stuff, and it's spelled
Yeah,
WRIGHT.
this one
He's
was great.
talking, yeah. Do you think he's talking about entrepreneurials and people that have achievements and and that we don't celebrate them just for their achievements because and he was ahead of his time on criticizing the DEI type stuff
Yeah.
where he's saying, he says, alas, Orwell and Wilbur Wright are today pigeonholed as, quote, dead white males whom we are supposed to ignore, if not deplore.
Yeah.
And it's so important. Obviously, we got to put people in the context of when they lived, and nobody's perfect. But just because they're from one group or class or the other doesn't mean we shouldn't study how they achieve things
Hmm.
and how they accomplish different things. And the amazing story, every one of these people that have achieved greatness in some way, it usually turns out to be a fascinating person in many respects. And I love how he has um, he mentions like um, uh, he mentions again the Einstein syndrome, which is the previous article where he's
Hmm.
talking about, it says vast majority of people who talk late are boys, and I had no control over that.
Yeah.
Meaning the people are questioning, well, why are you using examples all these men
Hmm.
and these white people, and he says, well, in a predominantly white society, it should not be surprising that famous men who talk late were mostly white.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of if you're studying a group of white people, the examples you're going to have, they're going to be white
Yeah.
predominantly. He says, no
Makes his,
doubt,
yeah.
in China, most would be Chinese,
Yeah.
which I think is just a
Yeah.
great example of just rational thought,
Hmm.
and not to try to pigeonhole people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also really true because he says, they're the dead white males who we should ignore. But if they had been any other group of people, we'd have, anniversaries of their, 100-year anniversary of this, and we'd have parades, and we'd have celebrations, and all of their pictures would be everywhere and things like that, and they'd be celebrated so much more. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, especially like if you look at the kind of the common joke is like the Google search page. Every once in a while, they'll have like a famous person who was born on this day or something, and it's always the most obscure person you've ever seen, and it's like the first black Peruvian feminist poet to ever win, this award or something. It's like, okay, interesting. But I think it's so like racist. These whole ideas and trying so hard to not be racist, you're being racist because you're saying, well, yeah, of course, the white men did it first. Of course they did. It's more exciting when somebody else does it because it's like almost like a rarer occurrence
Mm-hmm.
for somebody who's not a white man to do it, and therefore they have to be celebrated because it's more difficult for someone who's not a white man to do it because the white men are better at it. It's like, okay, what's the logical
Right,
meaning of
right.
this? If like you're celebrating these people over others, I don't know. It's strange.
Well, and I'm looking forward to. I don't know if it'll ever come in my lifetime where women, the first woman to do everything, has been done.
Mm,
And I think we're getting close. We
yeah.
still haven't had the first woman president because the Democrats keep nominating dipshits,
And
corrupt,
Trump has beat
corrupt
both of
dipshits.
them.
And my hope was the first African American president would be conservative, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I think to the disadvantage of all of us. But if maybe you can get a conservative woman to be president, like Margaret Thatcher was a prime minister of Great, England or Great Britain or whatever
The
back
UK,
in the 80s.
technically, yeah.
And so, um, I mean, once that happens, that would be another one of those things we could check off and not have to hear about again. Oh, that's the first one ever. Okay,
Hmm.
well, usually the first one doing something is not the best.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody pays attention to that, but the Tiger Woods wasn't the first golfer.
Yeah.
you know, and people improve over time. They
Hmm.
learn from the people that break through, and the best of
Hmm.
any category is usually not the first one to do it. Boy, that is the case for a lot of these
Hmm.
the current crop. But anyway, I look
Yeah.
forward to that day. I don't know if it'll because it'll be the oh, here's the first female dog catcher of
Yeah.
Podunk County, Missouri.
There you
Oh,
go.
okay, it's kind of incidental,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's a curious. I long for the day that it's a curiosity. Oh,
Hmm.
that's kind of interesting. Hmm,
Yeah.
we really haven't had one. Hmm. Well, that's okay. So what the that's that's not
Yeah.
it's not something to
Yeah.
celebrate. It's just an interesting
Yeah,
thing. Like,
interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Let's see what they do in that position. Let's
correct.
not, let's
Right. Yeah.
celebrate this, just on the fact itself. Yeah.
Right.
Well, here's an anecdote for you since you brought up the first golfer. The first golfer, according to The Hobbit, was Bull Roarer Took, a relative of Bilbo Baggins, who was so big that he could ride a horse, I think, or
Yeah.
a pony who could ride a horse. And he fought in a battle against some goblins or something and knocked the head of a goblin clean off and knocked it down a rabbit hole. And that was how the game of golf was invented.
Interesting. Had you
So,
see there? I saw a little preview when I
I know
was.
what you're talking about. Is it the War of the Rohirrim, the animated
Yeah,
show?
it's like an
Yeah.
anime. I just saw part of it as I was on the treadmill. I'm like, oh, is Adam going to be excited?
No. Yeah, I've a rant about that one. The protagonist of the movie is an unnamed female character in the books who's been given a name. And the ad that I saw most recently was like some child, oh, what about the Shield Maidens? Do we have any Shield Maidens anymore? Tell me a legend of the Shield Maidens or something like. Because Eowyn was the Shield Maiden of Rohan. It was an honorary title, and she ended up killing the Witch King and stuff like that. And evidently, the showrunners have decided to make that like a historical thing where you have these powerful women. But I digress. The
Wasn't that weren't the shield maidens the ones that just uh, received the shields after the
Yes,
battle?
yes.
They didn't actually participate in the battle.
Yes, and that's what was so unique about Eowyn is that she actually
Yes,
did. That's
right.
part of her whole character. But
Yeah,
by making it this extraordinary thing or this
she was
really common
literally the
thing,
only woman out there,
yes, exactly.
and
But
she's like, "I am no man." Ha ha!
yes, in
And he's
the
like, "Oh
original
shit!
story, exactly.
I knew I should have stomped on you a few 5 minutes ago and quit playing around."
Yes. In the original story, in Tolkien's writings, this is in the appendices to Lord of the Rings. It's given in very brief form, but it's about the history of Rohan and the founding of Helm's Deep, the big castle and the two towers where they have the big battle. And a conflict emerges because the king essentially promises his daughter off for marriage. This is the unnamed daughter to try and provide peace. And so then conflict ensues. He has to build a big castle, and it's Helm Hammerhand is the name of this king, and he builds Helm's Deep. It's named after him. It's an interesting story of sort of the politics of Middle Earth and the history there. But of course, this unnamed daughter, who's again not given any name in the writings, is turned into the one who I think is going to end up saving King Helm, who's like a notable warrior, because she has to save the day, and it'll be a whole different adventure, and of course entirely different than what Tolkien wrote,
I think it'll
which
be
is.
excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, I'll see it. I've sat through both seasons of the Rings of
Oh,
Power show.
really?
Yeah. It's
I
almost entertaining just to see what they do because they're almost trying to make it as bad as possible. It's almost
yes,
impressive.
yes. I was thinking I needed to write a bad story.
Yeah.
But I think that there's so much bad. I don't know that anybody would recognize it as bad.
Yeah.
I might be a celebrated author if I do it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an insane show. The Ring if I'm guessing you haven't seen any of it and I don't think you should.
I saw a couple episodes, but I
Mm,
couldn't stand it
yeah.
because they were traveling and like the wheel broke and
Yes.
they met the Gandalf character
Yes.
and
Amnesia, Gandalf and the not
yes,
hobbits and
and
yes.
I'm like, dude, these people are the softest people in the world, and they're traveling cross country, and you know, I don't know how you're soft and pudgy under
Yeah.
those circumstances. You know that in the movies they were a little heavy set, but they're hardy folk.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
you could see them behind a horse or something plowing a field or
Yeah.
doing manual labor because
Hmm.
they had some physicality to them. They weren't just soft. It's my complaint about all the Star Wars female heroes.
Hmm.
It's like if you're going to have a female hero, you have to have a Gina Carano. You have to
Yeah.
have a UFC fighter.
Hmm.
If you're going to have if I'm going to suspend disbelief and think that this 115 or 150-pound woman can physically brutalize a 250-pound man,
Yeah.
they have to look somewhat
Yeah.
capable of throwing a punch.
Hmm.
Anyway, no,
Yes.
I have seen a little bit. I couldn't stand it. It was making me so angry,
Yeah.
and I was ruining it for everybody else in the room
Yeah.
with my comments. And by
You
the
you,
way,
you tend to do that.
I have a rant about the Chosen that I'm about to go
Mm.
on. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I mean, even aside from all of the deviations from Tolkien's, writings, it's just horribly written. It makes no sense. Characters just
Yes,
appear,
yes,
randomly when they should be halfway across the world. There's no good motivation for a lot of things. All the dialogue's terrible. It's all written. I think this is a problem with a lot of modern media. It's written in a way that's trying to emulate Tolkien's writings.
mm,
Do that. So it's like a bunch of this fake, archaic, like if you hear it at a distance, it's like, oh, that sounds kind of profound. But then when you actually think about what they're saying, it's like, okay, that doesn't really make sense. You're just saying like similes in a sentence for no real reason. And it's just like, okay, well, what is the point of all of this? I don't see any point to this. It's just sort of flavor text and everything's just nonsensical.
yes,
But Tom Bombadil's in it, and he kind of sounds like Forrest Gump, which is horrible. And he teaches Gandalf how to use magic, and how to find a staff or something. Oh, and the way that Gandalf gets his name. This is great because, of course, he has amnesia because he falls from a comet into the world,
All right.
as he
Okay.
does.
Okay. I'm out. I'm out.
Yes.
And this is a problem with the left. They take something of beauty and creativity
Hmm.
that has merit. They hollow it out. They wear it as a skin, and they destroy it. And they
Yes.
prance about with this carcass on them, pretending to be art, and they are just defiling the universe
Yeah.
with the hollowed out, bleeding, rotting carcass of what was once beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's
And
accurate.
and I loathe them, and they should be loathed.
That's fair.
Yes.
You had a rant about The Chosen,
Yeah.
or
Have you
you
seen The
ranted out.
Chosen? Have
I haven't
you?
seen a single episode, but I've heard a
It's
lot about
actually
it.
it's really good. I mean, there's obviously it has to be fictionalized because they're filling in what it would be like to be along with the 12
Yeah.
apostles. They give a really prominent role to Mary Magdalene,
Hmm.
which is fine. I mean, she's there and all that. But there's this whole storyline of Thomas that
Hmm.
he fell in love with this gal. They're going to be married, and then some people were going to try to stone Jesus after he gave a sermon, and this gal got accidentally killed.
Hmm.
And so he's beside himself with grief, and he's angry at God, angry at Jesus. And then we just watched the episode where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And Thomas is beside himself. This fictitious Thomas is beside himself with anger at Jesus because he raised Lazarus from the dead, but he didn't raise
Hmm.
this gal he is not yet married from the dead when he could have. And I'm thinking, yeah, I could see maybe a tinge of like, why isn't he raising? Why isn't he doing this for somebody I cared about or this and that? But I'm pretty sure that Thomas would have been more focused on he just raised this dude from the dead. This is God. He's the Messiah, and he is healing
Yeah.
people. He is multiplying food. He is standing on the stormy seas.
Hmm.
He raised this dude who had been dead for days back to life.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they would all be like, holy shit, man, that's effing awesome. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But no, it's like the whole episode was how, and everybody's like, oh, how's Thomas going to take this? How's he going to react to this fictionalized death of some person? Because Jesus had the audacity to raise this other person from the dead than Thomas's girlfriend.
Interesting.
I was beside myself ranting and raving during the episode. But thankfully, your mother at the end of it all, because usually I just ruin things and she's angry at me when I do that. She's like, "Yeah, you're right. That was really stupid."
Yeah, that does sound really stupid.
Anyway, so let's start rifling through the stuff.
Yes. The next article is
Here's your rant.
revisionists. Revisionists against America. And this is interesting. It starts with this story of this Chinese teacher, American. He says American of Chinese ancestry. When he was talking about how when he was growing up in China, rejoiced when he heard of the bombing of Hiroshima.
Yes.
And it was a good thing to the Chinese people because they were being attacked and invaded by all the Japanese, and the Japanese were doing terrible things to the Chinese people at the time. And he saw it as an end to war, and he goes into the estimates of how many people would have died if it would have been a land invasion, things like that. And essentially his messages here is it's like, it's seen as the atomic bombs were this horrible, horrible thing, and there was no good part about them, and you can't even argue that they might have been beneficial because sort of the current stream is no, they were terrible and should never have happened. And if you try to provide any evidence against it, saying that maybe they were necessary and maybe more lives were saved by them, then you're sort of ostracized and you're being a terrible person just by thinking those things.
Yeah, and he does it in such an articulate way where he gives gives the historical analysis, of the contemporaneous people at the time. They had
Hmm.
estimates, military estimates, because they had to plan for how many troops they needed, how many casualties they expected, and they were not astronomical. I mean, they were rational,
Hmm.
but they were high.
Yeah.
They were expecting, a million casualties,
Yeah.
meaning
Because then we
dead
said, yeah,
people.
the Pentagon estimated that the war would have gone on for like another 2 years
Oh,
until
for sure.
1947.
For sure. And so I think what people are missing is when you're talking about war and decisions to use this weapon or this tactic or that tactic, what you're talking about is bad or bad. I
Hmm.
mean, it's you're going to be killing. Like for example, what my point is that people think about these things in childish ways.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's bad to drop the bomb. Yeah, 100%. It's not a good thing to drop a nuclear bomb. That's not the question. The question is, given a series of bad choices, which one can you justify rationally
Yeah.
choosing? And just because it's one bomb that kills a lot of people doesn't make it any more or less evil than dropping tens of thousands of incendiary bombs, which kill the
Hmm.
same number of people or more. And when you're in the military, of course, I'm not in the military, I have no experience with this. So I'm just talking theoretically. But as a matter of strategy, you would frequently plan a feint. Like you appear you're attacking from this side, and you're so that you lull the opponent into counterattacking that same area or fortifying that area, and you're really sacrificing a certain number of troops for that diversionary tactic.
Hmm.
So to give cover to your main attack, to go around you're making a decision to sacrifice a significant number of people so that ultimately you lose less troops in the total battle or the war.
Hmm.
And when you're in that mode, um, you make these calculations, and it's
Yeah.
rational to make those calculations, and it's horrible,
Yeah.
and that's why you don't go to war,
Yeah.
and that's why you don't wear the stupid Ukrainian pin on your lapel when you're in the Senate and start talking about bombing Russia.
Yeah.
Because once you get that started, eventually you're going to have to make those calculations about tactical nuclear weapons and how many
Hmm.
people are going to die vis-a-vis whatever strategy that you're going to do as a counterattack. And his point about the revisionists, they always revise history against American interests.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like we've completely lost an understanding of like just war theory, of sometimes there is a motivation to go to war and to fight and combat, and you have to make those decisions of what is the just thing to do here, the more just thing. But now of course war is not a good thing. War is a bad thing. But when people hear that, they say, okay, war is bad. You have to be anti-war to be good, so you have to oppose all conflict ever. And because the US engaged in war and war is bad, then the US is bad in all of these contexts, and therefore the US is evil and we're a horrible nation and we're imperialists, et cetera, whatever, derogatory term you want to throw on there. But it's like you did a bad thing. Um, don't even bother to look into the justifications for why that was done or what the purpose was behind it. But this was bad. You are now bad inherently. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, like you said, it's childish philosophy. It's just like your surface level. You're not even being serious about it. It's just a joke.
Yeah.
It's trivial.
Hmm.
Your thoughts on these issues are trivial. You're not even interesting for a dinner conversation, let alone to be some sort of analyst or
Yeah.
political thinker.
Yeah, well, this was something that Molly, my girlfriend, mentioned to me because she saw once somebody was wearing a shirt. It was one of those like free Palestine, free Ukraine, free, several other conflicts. And there's one on there was like free Sudan, I think. And she was just baffled by that. She's like, isn't it a civil war that's going on? Who are you freeing them from? Are you freeing them from themselves? What does that even mean? But it's like one of those things. It's just like I don't remember if it was Sudan, but I forget the exact country. But it was somebody who was in a civil war, and it's like, okay, what
Yes,
what what are you freeing them from? It's an internal conflict. What
yeah.
does that mean?
You're freeing them from the lack of colonialism. That's what you need to free them from. you know, I mean, that's the only way they're going to have freedom is if some other foreign power pacifies them and provides them with
Yeah,
safety and security.
yeah. But it's one of those
I
places where it's
agree.
just
We should free Palestine from the terrorists.
there you go.
That's what Israel's doing.
Yeah,
I don't know what to think about the tactics they're using, but it's
yeah,
like it's again, you have nothing but bad choices if you're Israel.
yeah, yeah,
What are you going to do? When they'll just come across and murder your children.
yeah.
It's like, well, And then they say, when you're pummeling them, and you say, "Well, give us back these hostages," and they say, "Well, no, we're gonna do it again." How do you even say you're going to negotiate with
Yeah,
these people?
I don't know.
That's why we insisted on um, uh, a complete and total surrender from the Germans. We had fought
Hmm.
2 world wars. We weren't going to allow them
Yeah.
to have a military again. We divided up their country.
Hmm.
Anyway, all right.
Yeah.
So I
The
think we
next article, I think we already kind of touched on, was the
yes,
autism cures in quotations. And it's like we have so many more people just being diagnosed with autism, and you kind of come up with some miracle cure thing you should do. And of course, we're having increasingly high percentage of those people who just never had autism in the first place. So your cure rate is really high because over time they just grow out of whatever phase they were in when they were wrongly misdiagnosed with autism. It's just like, oh, my cure works.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I saw this a lot when you boys were growing up. You have contemporaries, the other children that are, especially the boys. Oh, well, we've got to put him on Ritalin because he's
mm,
he's overactive and he's got his terrible attention span. I'm like, well, dude, get that stupid screen out of their face. Have you tried not having a TV in their bedroom? How about you
yeah.
try not to have video games in the house before you start medicating the
Yeah.
kid?
Or maybe they're just, an 8-year-old boy, a noticeably calm group of people. It's
Yeah,
like one of those,
right.
it's like, well, yeah, maybe they are just hyperactive because they're an
Yes.
8-year-old boy.
Yeah, maybe play catch with him,
Yeah.
or something. But if you when you suggest that, like I've suggested that to a couple friends way back in the day. I'm like, hey, you know, maybe take away that Game Boy or whatever it was in
Hmm.
that era,
Yeah.
and if anybody got in that subject in any sort of detail with me, the first question I asked was, will they have a TV set in their room
Mm.
and in their bedroom? Well, yeah. Why?
Yeah.
Why do they have a TV set? Well, he likes to go to sleep with the TV on. You mean you're bombarding him with commercials? What the hell is he watching? Well, I don't know. I go to sleep. Like, okay.
Yeah.
That's and now with the iPads and iPhones and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
uh, I've lost hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I still don't have
Well,
a TV in my room. I don't keep a TV in my room. I mean, every
no,
once in a while,
we
I'll,
don't.
yeah, I'll
What's the
watch
point?
YouTube videos on my phone sometimes, but, I don't sit around with just like noise playing.
Yeah, when it's shocking for me when I go over to, I don't go over to people's homes very often, but when I do, and there's a TV on in the background, and it's blaring. Like,
Yeah.
why is it? Turn that off.
Yeah.
That's distracting.
Hmm.
Oh, we just leave that on. No, no, turn it off.
Yeah.
Rude. It's rude. Turn your
Yeah.
stupid TV off.
The next article, unless you have anything
What?
else to say
Yeah, more
about TVs.
rants. I'm feeling much better. This
That's
this
good.
is, this is my form of
Yeah.
therapy where I just rant about
Yeah.
random topics
That's good.
to the ether.
Yeah, I'm glad that
Okay.
I'm involved here.
I
Um,
think you are.
the next article, instructing the instructors, was basically just a rant. I read this
Yes.
one. I thought it was kind of funny because it's very early 2000s. It felt like to me, where he's
Yes.
talking about computer programs and how the
Mhm.
instructions assume that you already know how to get somewhere,
Yes.
like in the menu and stuff like that. And it was no, we need instructions on how to get to that. I don't know how to use this machine. You're starting at like step 5. But yeah, this just seemed like he was very frustrated with the computer and then sat down and wrote this. So I don't know if we have too much to say on that one,
No,
but that one.
I thought you would have appreciated it a little bit more because it's kind of a linguistics
Hmm.
diatribe, about how using
Yeah.
language, not properly describing things, and,
Hmm.
not being precise in your language.
Yeah,
But
because
yeah,
he talks about
it
how
was
needlessly wordy it is. And he's like, all these
yes,
instruction manuals are more concerned with like, I think he says like the 3% of like the really fancy stuff that you'll never
yes,
use, and they
yeah,
don't
right,
really talk about the 97% of like the body of the program, where it's like how you
yes,
actually do the things that it's made to do, and not all just the extra stuff. It's like they're mostly like sales guides, these instruction manuals, rather than just
yes,
how to. But no, I think he's right about that. That's true for a lot of things too, where it's like the language just sort of dances around everything rather than
yeah.
giving you what you want.
Well, the next one is really entertaining. The April Fool's
Yeah,
party, people probably Google that or find that
yeah.
somewhere.
I just suggest read that because it is really
Yes.
funny. The karate expert martial arts and
Yeah.
timber eris lotta wood. Yeah, it's just a bunch of plays on words with names and things like that. So I encourage people to read that one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any
I
thoughts on the next
The
one,
growing
growing
old.
old.
Yes, I love this one. I especially like this. I have disliked this concept since my youth. And he says nothing is more ridiculous than discounts for senior citizens when people in their 60s have far more wealth than people in their 30s.
Hmm.
I have thought that was obscene. We if you have discounts, you should have young family discounts. Okay, that I get because those people are literally our future. They're raising our future. Why the hell do we have senior citizen discounts? Why do we have senior citizen hours? Those people have nothing but time
Mm-hmm.
and money.
Yes. But this article was just a list of literally just thoughts about growing old, where he just
Yeah.
has his little points that he makes. There's one that I thought I'm not sure if it is entirely true anymore.
Mm,
And it's this one. He says, "You would think that young people with decades of life ahead of them would look farther ahead and plan for the future more so than older people, but it is just the opposite. The young tend to be oriented to right now, while old timers think about the future of their children and grandchildren and worry about where the country is heading in the years ahead." I
yeah.
think that's true to an extent, but I think the current generation of older people, we've lamented about them before, the baby boomers, I think is one of the most selfish generations of people that I've had to interact with. And I worked customer service jobs and answered the phones for a senator. And 9 times out of 10, the older people, the boomers, are much, much more selfish and self-oriented than the young people who call in or have problems. The younger people are always more apologetic and always like, "Hey, I don't want to bother you, but I had this question about this." The older people are demanding.
Yes.
The current old generation is I think very selfish.
Yes.
You don't have any other thoughts on that?
I mean, I could go on
Yeah.
unlimited rants, although I don't know that it's that much worse than it was when I was working
Mm,
customer service in my teens and 20s, because those old people were a pain in the butt back
yeah,
then too.
that's true.
But I think maybe it's a percentage of them,
Mm,
um, and I think a lot of it, quite frankly, I think a lot of it is like, well, the stereotypical Karens,
mm,
the women who insist on being assertive, and when you're old, like I'm 54, and I'm still a man, I still have the same tendencies and same, uh, oh, what do you say, masculine thoughts or whatever. But I have to realize I got to be careful if I'm mouthing off to a 20 something year old. He can mess me up,
yeah.
and some of these senior ladies don't realize how fragile they are and how
Hmm.
how dangerous the world can be in an instant. And they won't stop mouthing off. And uh and and, and it's 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 wild. There's no consequences. There's no accountability for their behavior. And I think it really started in my youth with this customer service philosophy. The customer is always right.
Yeah.
Okay, that was kind of a new
Hmm.
concept, I think, in the 70s. And it was a brilliant concept to allow for returns and exchanges. The
Yeah.
customer's always right
Well,
because it would get brand
yeah.
loyalty and customer loyalty. But I think it really has gotten out of
Yeah.
control
Well,
now.
part of the quote is missing. The original quote was that the customer's always right in taste. The customer
Mm,
always knows what they want in terms of, what style they want or what, menu option they want, and you should cater towards people's preferences. It's
yes,
not that the customer has the right to come in and demand whatever they want of, whatever employee happens to be
right,
unfortunate enough to working that day. It's no, you should cater your products to what the customer wants. They're always right in taste. Cater that. You shouldn't cater to yourself because your thoughts might not align with what the general public wants.
right.
And that's people just do not remember that part of it. It's just no, I am always right. Give me what I want right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think the major corporations have adopted the more expansive view of it.
Yeah.
I think you are
Yeah.
right about the
Yeah.
origin of it.
Yeah, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, but the two main customer service positions I've had was the working the service desk at Lowe's, managing returns and complaints and things like that, and then answering phones in the U.S. Senate for Josh Hawley. And the people who call in, to Senate offices are the exact same type of people who complain about returns at Lowe's.
Mm.
It is the Venn diagram is a circle. You do not
Yes.
get happy people calling into Senate offices. You do not get happy people coming up to the customer service desk, with some very few exceptions. But it's always, this is wrong. You need to fix it right now. Senator Hawley, I hate you. Everyone working for you is an evil person. Fix it right now. It's overlap, 100%.
Yeah, don't you love those? I'd like to return this garden hose every October. You know,
Yes, we had someone do
Um,
that exact thing,
yep,
where she came in with a broken hose, and she says, "I'd like to return this, swap it out for a new one." I'm okay. Yeah, is it within the 3 month warranty? There's a very generous warranty at Lowe's. She's like, "No, I bought it last year." I'm like, "Okay,
yep,
sorry, we can't return that. Our hoses are over there if you want to buy a new one." Well, I've done this every year for
mhm,
5 years. You
yes,
cannot tell me I can't. I'm like, you've done this every. How have you done this every year for 5 years? Or the broken generators. I bought this
yes.
generator 6 years ago and it stopped working. Can I? No, you can't get a refund. Why would you get it? We don't want it. Why would you give it back to us?
Those hose
Ugh.
people have been around since at least the '90s, the early '90s when I was working retail.
Yes. And the problem is, of course, I'll have to call my manager over because I always insist.
Right.
And then the manager always capitulates because it's so much easier to say, yeah, whatever, just take the stupid hose than just deal with this horrible, angry woman.
At some point, the worm will turn and we're like, "F you, give me your broken hose. You're not taking our hose. We're taking something from you."
Yes. The
All right.
next
So,
article, yeah,
yes.
moving on, is titled Foreign Domestics. And this is all about the idea that, somehow we Americans have this idea that, domestic jobs are just much lower class,
Mhm.
and are just to be looked down upon. And, if you're working those, you're sort of not a very good person in some way. It's beneath you. So of course these positions are taken by foreign immigrants. He mentions the Japanese when they came over were largely working like in homes, and then a lot of them developed their own like agriculture businesses out in California and things like that. And he's saying you're seeing the same things now with Mexican immigrants,
Mhm.
where they're coming in, they're taking these sort of domestic jobs that we think are beneath us, and then they're getting ahead and they're starting their own companies and stuff. While American citizens are just like, well, I don't want to do that. Why would I do that? And it's like,
Yep.
well, you're just giving those opportunities to someone else. If you actually
Yep.
applied for these positions and took them, you would be moving up in the same way that they are.
Yep. I mean, there's a reason why you don't see any Caucasian roofers
Yeah.
anymore, because the Hispanics, whether they're Mexican or Honduran or whatever region they're coming from, those are good paying jobs. They're hard,
Hmm.
they're hard work. But when I was a young public defender, many of my clients were roofers because those were the jobs were, if you spent a few days in jail, you wouldn't lose your job. You just lose those days, and your boss would pick you up because you didn't have a license anymore, and you make a tour of the trailer park and pick up the 5 or 6 guys he needs for the jobs for
Yeah.
that day or the next day or whatever. But the joke was, in order to be a roofer, you had to have a felony prior.
Yeah.
But you don't see anybody. You
Yeah.
have these teams of people that they're tremendous workers and very efficient. Same thing with landscaping businesses and all that. I love Sowell's quote here where he says, "There are no dead end jobs; there are only dead end people." So I
Hmm.
mean, uh, every job has its own value, and just has work. Just because you're working at one thing today doesn't mean you're going to be doing that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
If you excel at it and you seek opportunities,
Yeah.
you can advance from there.
Yeah, you made
But
you made an interesting point in there that I'd never thought of. But he says, in more than 30 years in California, I've never seen a Mexican American begging on the streets, though beggars and hustlers have become a common sight and a common nuisance. And I've
yeah,
never considered that. Like I see homeless people pretty frequently, but they're generally white or black. And if they are, a different group, it's a very small minority, but it is people whose families have likely been in America for several generations. It's not the people who are coming over and trying to make a living. It's, those people do. They go out and make a living and they apply for the hard jobs and they do them.
yeah.
And it's interesting. I never thought about that, but I don't know if I have seen a Hispanic person begging on the street.
Well, in our county, I only see white people
Yeah,
begging. And even into St. Louis County, it's pretty rare to see anybody other than a dirtbag white person, and they
yeah,
make good money.
yeah. It's mostly
Um,
there's a very well. it's a pretty small homeless population here in Gainesville, but it is majority white people. I mean,
Yeah.
the county I think is majority white, but still.
Florida man.
Yeah, exactly. Any other thoughts on that one?
No.
The final article that we
Yes.
wrote was Cruel Compassion. And this was a really good one because this is one of those, and we've talked about this before, where you can turn a word into something that's so like weaponized in a way. He says, compassion has become one of a growing number of politicized words like access or diversity, whose meaning has been corrupted beyond redemption. And he talks about, unborn babies has been driven out of language in favor of fetus, and things like that, where it's, we're using the language itself to make things not what they are.
Right.
Where, compassion, we say it's the compassionate option, it's the good option, when really the actions that these people are advocating for are not compassionate at all. They align with the social justice movement and whatever, sort of values they have, but it's not true compassion. It's not actually caring about those people. Usually it's about, feeding your own ego and, well, this is the best option for this poor, underprivileged person. Be compassionate, vote exactly the way that I want you to vote and the way that benefits me, and therefore you too will be compassionate. It's that warping of words in that way, just using them for whatever purpose you want.
Well, he mentions the specific argument about adoption,
Hmm.
interracial adoption, that as if it'd be better off that these kids aren't adopted rather than being adopted by somebody that's a different race.
Yeah.
And when I was a new lawyer in private practice, we represented an adoption agency, and we did a lot of really good work for a lot of really good, strong people. And it was rewarding, but they had a fee structure such that if you were going to adopt an African American child, you paid lower fees. Uh,
Really?
yeah, it was cheaper because there's a supply and demand. There were so
Huh.
many little African American kids that were in the system to be adopted that they had plenty. But people who are Caucasian uh, want a child that looks somewhat like them, so they don't have all the questions.
Yeah.
Because if it's just your child, it's your child. But if you're as pale as me and you got a black kid, that raises questions.
Yeah.
How'd
Sure.
that guy come in your home?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you. It was just kind of fascinating to
Hmm.
me because it wasn't like a fee for the kid. It was fee for the service of the adoption of the home studies and that kind of stuff. But they charged less for African American adoptees because they wanted to encourage it too,
Yeah.
because they had a supply that they didn't have intact, married. Um, this was a religious based adoption agency, so they didn't have as many married couples, African American married couples that are willing to pay the fees or in a position to pay the fees
Yeah.
to adopt, little black kids.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've seen,
Fascinating.
people on the left, talk about this. I think it was Amy Coney Barrett who has two adopted black
Yes,
children.
correct.
Yeah, I've seen people like criticizing her, on the
Yeah.
left, being like, "Oh, look,
Mhm.
she's just using these black children and forcing them to be in white society, and look at these horrible things that she's doing to these black children just by adopting them." And
Yeah.
so this horribly racist argument where it's like, "Oh, so race does matter, and it's not, just a cultural thing. It's like just the race does you can't have a good society if you're a black child being raised by white parents just by virtue of your race. That's insane.
Right.
I just think that's crazy, and it's
Well,
coming from
and
the
it,
left. It's
yeah,
so
and
racist.
it invites a white power argument,
Yeah,
in response. It invites an argument saying, "Oh yeah, well, white people are better." I'm not saying that, but I'm
yeah,
saying it invites that type of
hmm
racialism, saying, "Well, wait a second, what about the outcomes
yeah,
for white kids versus black kids in intact homes and all that stuff?" But actually, in intact homes, it's equal.
yeah,
It's the other variables that screw everything up. But onto the his primary argument about language usage. I'm still screaming to the clouds for the Republicans to use the term documented foreign citizens.
yeah,
They're not illegal immigrants. They're not undocumented immigrants. They're documented foreign citizens.
hmm
Treat them like that.
yeah,
That's what they are. Get their papers, identify them, and put them back to their home countries. They're documented foreign citizens, for crying out loud. And so, if they would use those terms, it would change the entire debate.
yeah. Hmm.
But
That's
they
true.
aren't doing it.
That's
I'm
true.
brilliant.
Yes. I like what he says, just to read one more quote here before we end the episode. He says the ultra-rationalistic world of the anointed, where traditional ties and mores have been dumped into the dustbin of history, is the real goal, whether the specific issue is sex education, euthanasia, or adoption. Right? What are you just doing?
Nothing.
You're sticking your tongue out. I don't know what was happening there. But it caught me really off guard. Um, he says, yeah, because I think he's right. Where it's not really about compassion. It's not really about solving the problem. It's just about getting everything to fit within, whatever your weird worldview is. Where we're done with the past and we're moving into this new rationalistic age, and we're done with religion and conservatism and all of these traditional ways of society. That's the real goal of the left. You can call it compassion, but that's not really what it is at all.
Agreed.
Do
Well
you have any
put.
other final thoughts? This is a very
No,
tangential episode. Um,
I apologize.
no, it's all right. I engaged in it too.
I'm not really sorry, but
I
I
know you're not.
apologize.
You'll do it again next time. Well, next time we'll be in person.
Yay.
Hopefully for a few episodes, a few weeks. We'll be back home
Yes.
in Missouri for Christmas.
Yay.
All right. You have no final thoughts?
None.
All right. Well, I have been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
This has been season 10, episode 2 of Unlimited